Welcome to the debate. Imagine surviving the grueling decade-long path to become a surgeon, only to have your career completely dismantled.
Right, and not because you made a fatal clinical error.
Exactly. Not because you harmed a patient, but because of a $350 billing dispute. And, an oversight system that basically equates asking for basic therapy with being fundamentally impaired.
It's incredible. Today, we are exploring a profound tension that exists at the very heart of medical training. For the medical students and hospital administrators tuning in, this discussion goes directly to the core of your daily reality.
It really does. We're looking at the delicate, often deeply precarious balance between a medical program's right to administrative autonomy and the devastating tangible impact of systemic institutional failures.
And we are grounding this analysis in a specific, highly documented source material. The case of Dr. Dorender Gray. She's a Ghanaian immigrant, a first-generation college student, and an OBGYN resident at the University of Washington.
Right. And we are approaching this case with distinct perspectives on what these events actually represent. I'll be arguing today that while the outcomes here are deeply unfortunate, the necessity of program autonomy remains absolutely paramount.
And I will argue the opposite. I'll be presenting the perspective that Dr. Gray's case provides profound evidence of systemic failure.
So my position is that hospital administrators and academic deans simply must rely on independent, autonomous bodies, in this case, the Washington Physicians Health Program, or WHPP, to evaluate residents objectively. Standardized protocols and the ultimate authority of a dean to uphold terminations, these are the essential safeguards required to maintain academic rigor and protect patient safety.
I hear that, but my position is that autonomous oversight, when it is stripped of basic external accountability, easily transforms into a punitive monopoly. Dr. Gray was a star student. She had just 2 years left of residency.
Yeah, she was very close.
Right. She sought basic therapy to deal with a hostile work environment, and she was instead forced into a rigid drug rehab pipeline. I submit that this documented case demonstrates exactly how these systems can mask racial bias, punish vulnerability, and completely destroy a promising medical career under the unquestioned guise of protocol.
Let's lay the groundwork for why these structures exist in the first place. For the administrators listening right now, you know that the modern hospital is essentially a massive ecosystem of liability.
Oh, absolutely. Liability is everything.
Right. So if an administrator receives a resident's request for mental health leave amidst a period of academic or interpersonal disputes, that administrator is put in an impossible position. They cannot act as both the employer and the psychological evaluator.
Because of the conflict of interest.
Exactly. It's a massive conflict of interest. The entire structural purpose of a physician health program, a PHP, is to act as a liability firewall. It provides an independent third-party assessment to objectively separate clinical competency from departmental conflicts.
But look at what that objective assessment actually looks like on the ground. We have to look at the catalyst of this entire dispute because it colors the entire application of that so-called objective protocol.
The feedback issue.
Yes. Dr. Gray, who was literally featured in UW marketing materials for her achievements, raised concerns about experiencing harsher scrutiny than her co-residents. She noted highly inconsistent feedback.
Right, which led to her remediation.
Exactly. She was told she had to repeat 6 months of training. And here is the inciting incident. When she asked her attending physician why there was a lack of prior feedback during a rotation she had supposedly just failed, that attending explicitly stated she no longer gives feedback to residents of color.
That is a staggering statement. It is utterly inappropriate and, frankly, indefensible in any academic or clinical setting.
Indefensible, yet it functioned as the trigger for everything that followed. This explicit racial bias infected the entire disciplinary outcome.
Well,
it is perfectly natural that Dr. Gray was depressed by an environment where an attending admits to withholding feedback based on race. She requested time off to attend therapy, but rather than her residency program granting a standard medical leave, they weaponized that request.
Weaponized is a strong word.
But they did. They funneled her directly to the WHP. The bias of that attending didn't just stay in the clinic. It was the catalyst that pushed a vulnerable physician seeking standard mental health support into a rigid, mandated disciplinary apparatus designed for addicts.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. We have to conceptually separate the interpersonal clinical dispute from the subsequent medical clearance protocol.
I don't see how you can separate them.
Well, it's easy to look back and say the referral to the PHP was a weaponization of her request. But let's put ourselves in the shoes of the residency director. A resident is facing academic remediation, repeating 6 months of training, and simultaneously asks for leave of absence for mental health.
Right.
The program has a fiduciary duty to patient safety. They cannot just say, take a few weeks off and let us know when you feel better. If they do that, and the resident returns and makes a catastrophic surgical error, the hospital loses its accreditation.
Sure, the liability firewall again.
Yes, the protocol mandates that you remove the decision from the potentially biased department and place it with the external medical board. That is how you protect the patient and, theoretically, the resident.
I understand the theory of the external board, I really do. But the execution in Dr. Gray's case proves that the PHP mechanism was fundamentally flawed. It wasn't an objective safety net.
How so?
Well, the administrative oversight system is essentially the hospital's immune system. It's designed to attack pathogens, in this case, genuinely impaired doctors, operating under the influence, which is what PHPs were originally built to handle in the 1970s.
Right, that's their historical origin.
But in Dr. Gray's case, we are looking at a catastrophic autoimmune response. The system attacked perfectly healthy tissue because it misidentified basic human vulnerability as a disease.
I'm not sure I agree with that characterization. WPHP evaluates all sorts of cognitive and psychological conditions, not just substance abuse.
Because the system only knows how to apply one blunt instrument. Dr. Gray had absolutely no substance abuse issues, none at all.
She did have a medical history, though.
Her only medical history was a well-documented, long-standing diagnosis of ADHD, for which she took normally prescribed medication. Yet look at the immediate requirements WPHP placed on her. They mandated drug testing.
Standard protocol.
And then, they required a comprehensive 3-day mental health evaluation by their preferred providers at a facility located in Colorado, an out-of-state facility that specializes in mental health and addiction for professionals.
Right.
How is it objective or clinically appropriate to send an OB/GYN resident whose only crime is ADHD and asking for therapy to a 3-day out-of-state addiction center? I mean, it is applying a hammer to a situation that required a scalpel.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. The use of preferred providers and standardized testing protocols, even if they seem remarkably heavy-handed from the outside, is specifically designed to maintain a universal baseline of evaluation.
A baseline that includes drug testing someone with no history of drug use?
Well, when a state medical board or a PHP evaluates a physician, they absolutely cannot rely on ad hoc assessments from a resident's personal therapist. They use specialized facilities that are deeply accustomed to the unique, high-stakes occupational demands of medical professionals.
Okay, but
Let me just finish this point. A community therapist might not understand the cognitive load required to perform an emergency C-section at 3 in the morning. These out-of-state evaluation centers do. And we must acknowledge that this initial process, while arduous and deeply frustrating for Dr. Gray, did actually work in the sense that WPHP ultimately deemed her safe to practice initially.
oh, safe to practice.
Right. They formally communicated to her program that she was safe.
Safe to practice, but only after being stripped of her income, subjected to intense professional humiliation, and forced into an extended leave of absence that derailed her training. And we have to be clear, that wasn't the end of the objective evaluation.
You're talking about the neuropsychological testing?
Exactly. WHPP then required additional testing to supposedly verify her long-standing ADHD diagnosis. This is where the profound systemic incompetence truly crystallizes. They refer her for an exhaustive 8-hour evaluation with Dr. Lori Wohler,
A licensed clinical neuropsychologist.
which is exactly the specialty you would consult for an ADHD verification.
A licensed clinical neuropsychologist who was a very recent graduate with minimal neuropsychological testing experience. And what did Dr. Wohler do?
She provided a diagnosis. She diagnosed Dr. Gray with an unspecified neurocognitive disorder. She officially recommended immediate removal from work, extensive brain imaging, further neurological testing, and trauma therapy. Now, if you are a hospital administrator reading that report, you panic.
Of course you would. It's alarming.
But when Dr. Gray finally received the actual physical report, which she had to fight to get, by the way, it was riddled with egregious, frankly shocking errors. The official medical report cited Dr. Gray's lingering distress over her brother's suicide attempt and extensive childhood trauma.
Yes, the documentation errors. WPHP later characterized those as clerical issues.
Calling them clerical issues is a massive understatement. Her brother never attempted suicide. She had absolutely no such childhood trauma. These were complete fabrications.
Right, it was a software issue.
When Dr. Gray pointed out to the WPHP that this medical report literally could not be hers, that it belonged to someone else entirely, WPHP dismissed these massive fabrications as a mere copy-paste issue in their software, and yet knowing the report was fundamentally compromised, they still demanded her full compliance with the mandated treatment based on that specific evaluation to resume her career. That is not an objective baseline standard. That is systemic incompetence actively weaponized against a resident who has no power to fight back.
Look, I will certainly agree that the copy-paste errors in Dr. Woller's report are highly problematic. It represents a clear failure of that specific practitioner's documentation process, and frankly, it's embarrassing for the evaluating clinic.
It's more than embarrassing, it's malpractice.
But we cannot throw out the entire concept of autonomous oversight because of a single practitioner's sloppy paperwork. Institutional oversight requires mechanisms for appeal and review. Those mechanisms exist precisely because individual practitioners are fallible human beings. If an evaluation is flawed, the resident has avenues to challenge it within the medical framework.
But the appeal mechanism in this case only highlights the absolute monopoly of the PHP. Dr. Gray did exactly what a rational, innocent person would do. She proactively sought a second opinion.
Yes, from Dr. Sanchez.
Right, and she didn't just go to any random doctor. She went to Dr. Phyllis Sanchez, a clinical neuropsychologist with 25 years of experience who happens to be the former director of the UW Neuropsychology Clinic. You literally cannot ask for a more credible, authoritative, institutionally respected second opinion.
She is highly qualified, yes.
Dr. Sanchez reviewed the raw data. She concluded that the recent graduate, Dr. Wohler, had made serious scoring errors that led directly to the incorrect diagnosis. Dr. Sanchez confirmed the baseline ADHD, found absolutely no major cognitive deficits, and explicitly medically cleared Dr. Gray to return to work.
I hear that, but you have to realize that Dr. Sanchez's medical clearance doesn't magically erase the bureaucratic reality of the oversight program.
How could it not? The autonomous body you are defending ignored the findings of the former director of the UW Neuropsychology Clinic. The hospital acknowledged there was no medical reason to keep Dr. Gray out of work.
Medical reason, sure.
Her own residency program actively planned for her return to the clinic, and yet WHP refused to issue the formal clearance letter. They completely ignored the expert second opinion in favor of protecting their own flawed internal process. That is the exact definition of an unchecked monopoly prioritizing its own authority over objective medical reality.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it completely conflates clinical disagreement with contractual administrative compliance. Let's look closely at exactly why that formal clearance letter was delayed by the WHP.
Okay, let's look at it.
It wasn't because WHP was maliciously ignoring Dr. Sanchez's medical findings regarding her ADHD. It was a strict matter of administrative protocol. Dr. Gray had an outstanding bill with the WHP. Her file was literally not closed.
Are we really going to defend this? It was a $350 bill.
Yes, a $350 bill. But from the perspective of a hospital administrator, a contract is a contract. The mechanism here is crucial to understand. WHPHP acts as a clearinghouse.
A clearinghouse for a tiny invoice?
If a participant has not fulfilled all obligations of their evaluation process, which explicitly includes the administrative and financial terms they legally agreed to upon entering the evaluation pathway, the file remains open. The automated clearance letter simply cannot be generated for an open file.
It's just petty bureaucracy.
You might view it as petty bureaucracy, but hospital administrators must enforce protocols universally. They cannot make exceptions based on how much they like a resident. If a residency director allows a physician to return to clinical duties without the formal signed clearance letter from the mandated oversight body, they are in direct breach of safety compliance.
Wait, but
Is on the floor. The hospital's liability is limitless. The administrative file must be closed.
I come at it from a different way. We are talking about a highly trained physician's career, her livelihood, and her stated ability to serve underserved women being held completely hostage over an administrative coding error.
A coding error?
Let's look at why that bill existed. Dr. Gray sought clarification on that invoice and discovered WHP had actually overcharged her. They billed her at a professional rate instead of a resident rate. This wasn't her refusing to pay, this was her trying to correct their accounting mistake.
Even so, the bill was outstanding.
She had been out of work for half a year, rapidly losing income entirely due to WPHP's own diagnostic errors and mandated leave. And she was trying to navigate a billing mess created by the very people holding her career in their hands.
But she did return to work, didn't she? The program brought her back.
She returned because her program specifically scheduled her. They needed her. And medically, she was cleared by an expert. Her first week back, she received high accolades, including direct praise from the program director. She was demonstrating clear, undeniable clinical competence on the floor.
Right, she was doing well clinically.
Yet, because she returned to the clinic a few days before formally settling that disputed $350 overcharge, WPHP informed the University of Washington that she was not cleared to work, and the administrative response was nothing short of catastrophic.
Because of the contract breach?
WHPHP ended her contract for noncompliance. UW suspended her immediately, and then, based solely on the loss of that WPHP endorsement, they terminated her from the residency entirely.
The termination was based on a failure to maintain the mandated WPHP endorsement. That endorsement is a structural requirement of the residency contract. For the medical students listening, this is vital to understand about your contracts.
It's a trap.
If a resident loses their PHP endorsement, the residency program often has absolutely no legal mechanism to keep them employed. The dean upholding the termination is an act of malice. It is a reflection of this rigid yet legally necessary compliance structure. The dean carries the liability of the medical license for the entire hospital. They cannot simply overrule the state's designated oversight body.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. That rigid compliance structure completely failed its own internal review tests. A UW Grievance Review Committee, which is a formal academic body designed by the institution to evaluate these exact administrative actions, reviewed the entire timeline.
They did review it, yes.
And they unanimously called Dr. Gray's dismissal arbitrary and capricious. Unanimously. That is incredibly rare. When a peer review committee determines that a termination is arbitrary and capricious, and the dean upholds the termination anyway citing liability, we are no longer looking at necessary safeguards. We are looking at a system that protects its own authority at the expense of the people it is supposed to train.
It's easy to call the dean's decision arbitrary from the outside. But let's put ourselves in the dean's shoes. You have a regulatory body telling you a resident is fundamentally non-compliant with their mandated oversight contract.
Because of $350?
A grievance review committee offers a recommendation. Yes, but that committee does not carry the liability of the medical license of the hospital. If the dean ignores the PHB, reinstates the resident, and something goes wrong in the maternity ward a week later, the hospital is indefensible in court. The dean is trapped in a compliance cascade. They must prioritize the structural integrity of the oversight system above any individual case.
But at what human cost? Let's look at the actual outcome of preserving this structural integrity. Because of this relentless compliance cascade, Dr. Gray is now unemployed.
It is a terrible situation.
She is saddled with more than $153,000 in student loans, which are actively accruing interest while she cannot practice medicine. And the ultimate insult? After terminating her, WHP sent her a final, profoundly petty $50 invoice for unspecified services performed after her termination.
Okay, that is pretty bad.
A brilliant Ghanaian immigrant, a first-generation student who explicitly wanted to be an OBGYN for underserved communities, was bankrupted and broken by the very system claiming to save lives and careers. This is the reality of your autonomous system. It prioritizes punitive, blind compliance over human life and medical common sense.
Look, I hear the severity of those consequences. The financial and professional ruin she is facing is undeniably devastating. But we must pivot to how we actually fix this, because simply dismantling program autonomy isn't a viable solution for hospital administrators who need reliable, legally sound oversight mechanisms.
So what's the alternative?
We cannot go back to an era where residency directors hide and pair doctors to protect their program's reputation. The failures here suggest we need robust, aggressive reforms from within the autonomous structure itself.
Internal reforms for a monopoly rarely work. But what are you suggesting?
First, hospital administrators must rigorously audit the PHP preferred providers. If a clinic is utilizing recent graduates who are making copy-paste errors on high-stakes neurocognitive evaluations, institutional quality control should flag that immediately and remove them from the preferred list. The standard must be immaculate.
I agree with that.
Second, we need entirely transparent, standardized billing practices that clearly distinguish between attending physicians and residents so that a trainee is never financially blocked from compliance. And third, there must be distinct, non-substance evaluation pathways.
Yes, absolutely.
This is crucial. If a resident is requesting therapy for depression or seeking accommodations for ADHD, they should never be mandated into a 3-day addiction evaluation. The mechanism needs to match the diagnosis. These are internal refinements that preserve the necessary boundary between the residency employer and the medical evaluator while preventing the specific bureaucratic pileup we saw with Dr. Gray.
That is a compelling argument for internal refinement, but have you considered that internal refinement is vastly insufficient for a system that currently operates as an unchecked monopoly? I argue for structural, external accountability.
What would that look like?
We have to dismantle the absolute authority of the PHP. If a resident obtains an expert second opinion, especially from someone with the impeccable credentials of Dr. Sanchez, a 25-year veteran and former clinic director, that opinion must have a legal mechanism to override PHP mandates. We cannot allow an administrative body to ignore superior medical expertise just to maintain its procedural dominance.
But who decides which medical opinion is superior in real time? That introduces massive administrative friction.
The friction is necessary to prevent the destruction of innocent careers. Furthermore, we must establish genuine safe harbors for residents of color. When an attending blatantly states they won't give feedback to a resident of color, there needs to be a mechanism to report that bias without the resident fearing retaliatory medicalization.
I completely agree with the need for safe reporting.
The fact that a clinical dispute over racial bias was solved by funneling the victim into a disciplinary health program shows a profound structural rot. Until there is external accountability, PHPs will continue to act as weapons for programs looking to quickly remove inconvenient residents.
So to summarize where we stand today, I maintain that structured program autonomy, specifically the use of independent external bodies like PHPs to act as a liability firewall, remains the necessary bedrock of medical training and patient safety. Hospital deans must enforce compliance to protect the institution.
Right, the liability argument.
However, the mechanisms of this case clearly highlight that these structures desperately require stringent internal audits, specific clinical pathways that separate mental health from substance use, and rigid quality control over their contracted evaluators.
And I maintain that the current iteration of unchecked PHPs operates as a dangerous bias monopoly. Dr. Gray's case proves that without external accountability and the legal ability to challenge flawed, erroneous medical assessments, administrative protocols can and will be weaponized against the most vulnerable practitioners in our hospitals.
Yet, amidst this fundamental disagreement on structural authority, I think we have found a critical point of convergence today. We both entirely agree that the specific documentation errors, the fabricated copy-paste narratives regarding non-existent childhood trauma and family history, are an unacceptable medical and administrative failure.
Oh, absolutely. It never should have survived a basic review.
Exactly.
And we completely agree that suspending and subsequently terminating a clinically competent, highly praised resident over an administrative dispute regarding a $350 overcharged bill represents a profound bureaucratic failure. It serves neither the medical profession, the hospital's academic mission, nor the public, who desperately needs trained physicians.
It is a sobering reality for the medical students and hospital administrators listening today. You are operating within vast, complex systems that demand absolute clinical perfection, yet these systems are built and managed by fallible human beings.
Fallible human beings indeed.
We leave it to you to critically examine how your own institutions balance the realities of resident vulnerability, implicit bias, and the vital, non-negotiable need for objective oversight.
Because until those systems are held truly accountable for the lives they disrupt, the residents navigating them remain at profound risk.
The administrative system is indeed designed to be the hospital's immune system. But when it starts misidentifying vulnerability as a threat, relying blindly on the protocol isn't enough. We have to look at the whole picture, the whole physician, and the human costs of the compliance we enforce. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.